Hey guys, tonight we drift back not just in time, but into the olive-scented hush of an ancient landscape where everything moves a little slower. You find yourself standing in Arcadia, where the grass is lazy, the sun is unbothered, and even the cicadas sound like they're about to nap. It's the kind of place that doesn't really do urgency. Shepherds hum to themselves, goats blink slowly, and some gods get bored. And when gods get bored, they meddle. Tonight's story begins with Hermes. Yes, that Hermes, the wing-sandaled messenger god who usually zips from Olympus to Earth like a caffeinated hawk. But even divine postal workers have slow seasons, and when Hermes runs out of errands, he improvises with, let's say, mixed results. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking now, your sandals gently brushing against dry grass as the breeze nudges the olive branches overhead. The hills are soft, dotted with goat trails and abandoned shrines. You spot a crumbling statue Hermes, mid-stride, his mouth half open like he's about to tell a joke. You squint. Someone's drawn a mustache on him. In charcoal. It's definitely recent. You keep moving and stumble upon something strange. A scroll, just lying there, tied with golden twine, tucked under a rock shaped like a sleeping tortoise. You open it. It reads, "To whom it may confuse, congratulations on winning. Your destiny has been activated. A gift awaits you beneath the third moonrise of spring. Tell no one, especially not the goats." You blink. That's either a prank or a prophecy, possibly both. You don't realize it, but you've just found one of Hermes' early experiments in divine mischief. See, when you've delivered messages for centuries, you start wondering what would happen if you wrote a few yourself. Hermes had grown tired of mortals only reacting to news from other gods. He wanted to test his own material. Would humans panic if a note just appeared, sounding vaguely important? Turns out, yes, they would. It started as a game. Hermes would wander through meadows, slip notes into shepherds' lunch baskets, or whisper riddles into clay amphora just to see what mortals would do. One time, he carved a fake command into a tree stump, telling a fisherman to name his boat Destiny's Cow. The man did, and won 3 straight years of fish lotteries, totally unrelated. But Hermes took credit anyway. The messages got weirder. Beware the orange goat. Dig beneath the sandals. Do not eat figs before thunder. At first, people laughed them off, but then a farmer got trampled by a goat wearing a paint smear from the spring festival. Coincidence? Probably, but it planted a seed. Hermes, delighted, leaned in harder. He created a small, unofficial department, divine mail testing. He even fashioned tiny wax seals with ridiculous insignias, like a duck doing taxes or a confused lion. He called them postcards, though in truth, they were glorified napkin scrawls. Now, here's a fun historical footnote. Some early Greek vases do show Hermes holding scrolls with odd markings. Scholars still argue whether these were stylized depictions of messages from the gods, or just the world's first junk mail. Anyway, it was one lazy autumn morning that Hermes strolled through Arcadia and dropped his most dangerous postcard yet. Dangerous not because of its content, but because of where it landed. The message was simple. The one who reads this is chosen. The path opens at dusk. That's it. No names, no instructions, just vibes. He left it under a smooth stone near a crossroads often used by traders heading north. He chuckled to himself and zipped off toward Delphi for a wine tasting. The wind did the rest. A merchant from Thebes stopped for a nap, spotted the note, read it, stared at the sky. Was this a blessing? A threat? A divine spam campaign? Naturally, he did what any ancient Greek would do. Ran straight to the local temple and shouted, "The gods have chosen me," and then passed out. The priest on duty, a mildly nearsighted man named Eubolos, inspected the message, nodded gravely, and promptly invented an entire prophecy around it. Something about celestial twins, a bronze gate, and fish with crowns. Totally improvised. but with flair. The note made its way up the social ladder, eventually arriving on the marble breakfast table of King Cadmus of Thebes. Now, Cadmus had been trying very hard to avoid drama ever since that one time he accidentally founded the entire city on dragon bones. He liked things quiet now, predictable. So when a scroll showed up saying someone had been chosen, his first reaction wasn't joy. It was indigestion. He read it 6 times, backwards once, held it up to a flame, whispered to it. Nothing changed, but that just made it worse. By sundown, he had called an emergency assembly of priests, goat herders, dream interpreters, and one guy who said he once smelled Apollo. The scroll was placed on a velvet pillow, guards were posted, a feast was declared. Because of course, and somewhere, high above the clouds, Hermes sipped fermented fig nectar and grinned like a child watching ants find glitter. You're still walking barefoot now, because in dreams like this, sandals just vanish without reason, and you come upon a grove that feels suspiciously smug. The trees lean in a little too close. The grass hums as if it knows something you don't. This is where Hermes hangs out when he's bored. Not that anyone can really see him. He pops in and out of view, like a breeze with opinions. Today, he's lying belly up across a stone bench carved with owl feathers, juggling 2 pomegranates and a fig annusi. He's humming something that sounds like it might become a sea shanty 3 centuries from now. Nothing urgent today, he mutters, flipping 1 fruit higher. Zeus hasn't summoned me. No mortal births to supervise. No heroes whining about sandals. I could nap? Pause. Or I could intervene. You know that tone? It's the tone of someone with too much energy and no consequences. Hermes sits up. His eyes flash mischief. What if I invented vacation mail? Now, to be clear, this is not mail about vacations. This is mail on vacation. Messages with no job, no sender, no purpose, just floating ideas dropped into the mortal world like breadcrumbs for the absurd. He reaches into his satchel and pulls out a quill carved from a raven feather, dips it into ink, brewed from crushed midnight berries, and writes, "You have been observed. The moment is approaching. You are ready." He giggles. That could mean anything, and that's exactly the point. Hermes doesn't want clarity. He wants chaos, the harmless, self-inflicted kind, the kind where humans unravel entire belief systems trying to make sense of a sentence a god wrote, while mildly tipsy. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Hermes wasn't just the messenger god, he was also the god of trickery, travel, language, thieves, and boundaries. Basically, the god of what if we just didn't follow the rules. So, while Zeus dealt with thunderbolts and Poseidon with shipwrecks, Hermes delighted in leaving vague clues that mortals turned into epics. Some say he invented street signs, others say he just stole them, swapped them, and claimed it was a test. Today, he drafts 10 such messages in rapid succession, all written in elegant curls, sealed with wax shaped like a turtle balancing grapes. Because why not? He flies off quick as thought, light as gossip, scattering them through valleys, markets, under temple eaves, inside the mouths of startled statues. Each message is intentionally ambiguous. No names, no context, just phrases like, "The door opens once, then forgets. Watch the raven who wears the wrong sky. Do not trust the milk after eclipse." People love mystery, especially when it seems personal. Hermes lands in a small village square, unnoticed, and places one scroll between 2 rocks near a communal water basin. The perfect trap. Somewhere public enough to be found, private enough to feel meant just for you. As he straightens up, he notices something new, a child watching him. Barefoot, dusty, sharp-eyed, no older than 10. The kid tilts their head and says, "Are you a god or just weird?" Hermes smiles. "Why can't I be both?" The child shrugs. What does the message say? Hermes considers this. It says the moon doesn't need permission to be full. That doesn't make sense. Exactly. The child nods, then steals the scroll and runs off. Hermes laughs so hard he nearly falls into a fig cart. Here's your quirky tidbit of the night. In some fringe oral traditions from Thessaly, there's mention of Hermes's riddles, a game played by children where nonsense phrases are passed around and interpreted as divine instructions. Anthropologists still argue whether this was ever a real practice or just ancient improv theater with more sandals. Back in Arcadia, Hermes stretches like a cat, satisfied. He's planted his seeds. Now, he just needs to wait. Unfortunately, waiting is boring, even for gods. So, Hermes begins tracking his messages. He flits invisibly across the cities, watching how mortals respond. One man buries a scroll in a clay pot and claims to have found evidence of the future. A woman starts a school of prophecy after dreaming about the phrase. When owls forget, two rival merchants come to blows over a note that simply reads, "He knows." Hermes scribbles notes in a celestial ledger he titles Mortal Nonsense Reactions. Vol. He assigns rankings, mildly baffled, unnecessarily terrified. Built entire shrine, and the coveted started regional panic. It's all innocent fun. Until it's not, because one single scroll, ends up in Thebes. Again. But this time, someone writes back, "Yes, you heard that right." Someone replies. Hermes finds the scroll nailed to a temple wall. It's sealed with a lump of wax and a coin. No signature. The message inside reads, "We received your words. The fires have been lit. The wind awaits your sign." Hermes freezes. Wait, what fires? He rereads it. The wind awaits. And that's when he realizes his little prank might have gone from abstract curiosity to political tool. You see, Thebes has been tense lately. Trade disputes, oracle rumors, a few missing goats. It doesn't take much for people to start believing the gods are sending signs. Hermes frowns for the first time in centuries. Oops, he whispers. The air feels different in Thebes' tents, like a tight harp string waiting to snap. You walk slowly through the city gates, past carved lion statues whose chipped eyes seem to watch you. The marketplace buzzes, but there's an undercurrent of something nervous, like everyone's pretending they didn't read that message. You can feel it in the rhythm of footsteps, in the way the priests walk faster, how traders mutter prayers between sales. Somewhere in this city, a scroll arrived, one of Hermes's scrolls, and now it started to snowball. The message that landed here wasn't even his strangest one. It read, "When the mountain speaks, the sun will bend." And somehow, that was enough to launch a full-scale theological manhunt. It was found by a merchant named Myron, who upon reading the scroll abandoned his fruit stall, declared himself a prophet, and marched straight to the temple of Apollo to demand clarification. Apollo, notably, said nothing. He was busy being aloof on a swan boat at the time, but silence, as you know, is the loudest answer in Greece. The priests didn't know what to make of it, so they pretended they did. One claimed it referred to Mount Helicon erupting in song. Another thought it meant a solar eclipse. One guy insisted the sun was already bending because his windows kept melting. Historians still argue whether this last priest had sunstroke or just very bad window craftsmanship. Regardless, the scroll was declared authentic because, well, no mortal would write something that confusing on purpose. Right? Wrong. You, listener, already know the truth. Hermes had scribbled that line while arguing with a satyr over fig prices. He barely remembered writing it, but for Thebes, it was gospel. And once something becomes gospel, it gets monumental. King Cadmus, still reeling from the last cryptic scroll, was handed this new one during his morning grape soak. He stared at the words, blinked, reread, then said quietly, "We're being haunted by metaphor." His advisors, sensing both opportunity and dread, immediately held a council. Should they build something? Sacrifice something? Blame Sparta? Eventually, someone suggested they consult the city's dream interpreter, a woman named Ianthe, who once predicted a rainstorm by watching how her goat blinked. She was summoned. Ianthe, robed in wool and mystery, looked at the scroll, sniffed it, and pronounced, "This is a warning from Hermes himself. The mountain is our pride. The sun is our throne. We are about to be humbled." That did it. Full civic panic. The Theban council decided a temple must be built fast, not to Apollo, not to Zeus, to Hermes, just in case. That's how you end up watching a team of overworked artisans hammer marble at midnight while chanting, "Messenger, do not abandon us." One priest, in a panic, starts writing more scrolls back to Hermes. Most of them are very polite. One just says, "Please clarify." Hermes, for his part, is perched invisibly on the unfinished roof, eating grapes and wondering when things got out of hand. They're praying to me, he mutters, cheeks full. For what exactly? He peeks over the edge and sees a statue of himself being hoisted into place. It's wildly inaccurate. The wings are on the ears. The sandals look like croissants. I love it, he says. Here's your mainstream historical fact for this evening. Temples to Hermes did exist, though usually they were small shrines at crossroads or markets. He wasn't typically given the grand, echoing structures other gods enjoyed. But here in this fever dream version of Thebes, a massive temple was being built for the first time ever because of a sentence Hermes wrote while bored. Of course, the dedication ceremony needed drama. They scheduled a dawn ritual, trumpets, laurel crowns, a message dance choreographed in his honor, involving a lot of spinning and scroll waving. You stand among the crowd as the sun rises, the marble of the new temple glowing faintly pink. People hush. A priest steps forward with the original scroll held aloft, chanting words that sound serious but are 40% made up. And then Hermes shows up, uninvited. Curious, he doesn't announce himself. He simply materializes near the altar, fully visible. Everyone gasps. Some drop their olive branches. One woman faints into a basket of ceremonial cheese. The high priest stammers, "Oh, Hermes, we welcome you, O divine sender of signs." Hermes raises an eyebrow. Sender of what now? He's trying to catch up. Genuinely, he glances at the scroll on the altar. "Oh, that one, right?" he says. "That message." A pause. Very important. He adds vaguely. Someone whispers, "Is he testing us?" Another whispers back, "I think he's confused." And that's when Hermes makes his first mistake. Instead of clarifying that the message was nonsense, he goes with it. "Your interpretation has pleased me," he says grandly. "This temple is acceptable." The people cheer. Fireworks go off. Dancers spin. Someone releases doves. Hermes smiles, but underneath, he's sweating. Gods don't usually sweat, but he is spiritually perspiring. He leans over to a nearby goat and mutters, "This is escalating." The goat says nothing, probably wise. Here's your quirky tidbit. In ancient Greek storytelling, Hermes is often portrayed as the only Olympian with a sense of humor. He lies, cheats, steals, and still gets invited to dinner. But even for him, this is new territory, being accidentally deified over a prank. As the festival wraps up, Hermes flies off fast. He needs to undo this. But how? He considers explaining, but that would ruin the fun. So instead, he writes another scroll. This one is shorter. "The eyes of Athens are closing. Let them dream wisely." He grins. Maybe if he spreads the confusion wide enough, it'll dilute. You know, like divine damage control. So he flings the scroll into the wind, aimed southeast. It sails through the air, glimmering with potential mischief, and disappears behind the mountains, straight toward Athens. You're drifting now past fig orchards and dusty roads, past wandering philosophers debating whether rocks have feelings. Thebes fades behind you, humming with freshly carved marble and spiritual confusion. Ahead lies Athens, proud, poetic, and allergic to silence. It's midday when Hermes' latest scroll lands, completely uninvited, in the middle of the Athenian public square. It flutters dramatically before smacking a statue of Athena square on the nose and sliding into a grape cart. Nobody sees it land, but everyone hears the grape cart explode into chaos. Because Athens does not do subtle, a boy named Theo finds the scroll while trying to rescue an especially squashed grape. He unrolls it, reads the cryptic line, "The eyes of Athens are closing. Let them dream wisely," and immediately assumes it's a warning about blindness. He runs to his uncle, who happens to be a minor playwright and full-time overreactor. Within minutes, the scroll is copied, distributed, and performed as a one-act tragedy at a local amphitheater. Yes, really. You sit in the back row as a barefoot actor with wild hair dramatically sobs. The eyes, they close. But what do they see? The audience gasps, applauds, and someone near you mutters, "That's deep, man," while petting a goat that doesn't belong to them. Athens has spoken. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Athenians in the classical period were theater obsessed. Plays weren't just entertainment, they were news, gossip, philosophy, and therapy, all wrapped in a tunic. If a god so much as coughed, a chorus would be assigned. So of course, they interpret the scroll as divine commentary on civic awareness, or insomnia, or dreams as political tools. One scholar suggests the scroll is about literal dreaming, and Athens erupts into a brief, passionate argument about the ethics of napping. Seriously? Someone proposes a state dream symposium. Philosophers love this. Plato hasn't even written the Republic yet, but you can already feel it stirring in the back of someone's forehead. Meanwhile, Hermes is floating above it all, holding a bag of roasted barley like popcorn, watching his prank spiral. Again, he tries to whisper clarifications into the ears of poets, things like, "I meant that your pigeons are acting weird," or "maybe just hydrate." But they all write sonnets about it instead. One bard writes, "The closing of eyes foretells not sleep, but secrets buried in the civic deep." He sells 400 copies on clay tablets. Fringe fact of the day: some actual ancient Athenian poems were copied, recopied, and attributed to gods simply because the original author scribbled a dream told me this in the margin. Scholars still argue whether those were real dreams or just cover stories for bad metaphors. Back on Olympus, however, the scroll's effect has been noticed. Hermes returns, feeling smug but a little worried. He passes by Apollo, who's plucking a harp string way too aggressively. "You've been busy," Apollo says coolly. Hermes shrugs, just stretching the old messenger muscles, stretching them into Athens's collective psyche. I mean, they liked it. Apollo doesn't press further, but Hera does. She corners Hermes near a golden fountain shaped like a very judgmental peacock. "You know you've started something, don't you?" "I've started many things," Hermes replies, some of them intentionally. She narrows her eyes. "This smells like one of your jokes." It was a joke. Now it's an art installation. She glares. "Fix it." But Hermes doesn't. Not yet. Instead, he leans into the chaos. You watch him descend again, back to Athens, where word of the scroll has reached the assembly itself. Yes, the actual government of Athens is now holding emergency debates over what the message could mean. You sit in the marble gallery as one speaker insists it's a metaphor for naval readiness, and another argues it's about theater funding. Someone quotes the scroll and suggests banning naps altogether. The vote fails barely. Hermes decides. The situation requires balance, so he crafts a second scroll, a counter message. This one reads, "To open eyes is to miss the unseen. Trust the shadow." He throws it at Athens during a late-night poetry reading. It lands in a bowl of olives and is mistaken for part of the performance. Applause erupts. Someone paints the phrase on the Parthenon steps. Another playwright stages a sequel. At this point, nobody remembers what the first scroll said. But that doesn't matter, because now it's not just Thebes and Athens caught in Hermes' prank web. Whispers begin to spread rumors of divine messages, prophetic dreams, temples springing up from scribbled notes, all untraceable, all vague. And in every city, people start asking, what if our message is next? Hermes, reclining on a temple roof with his feet dangling over a gargoyle, sighs, "This is going better than I planned," he murmurs. But then, something unexpected. A courier arrives from Sparta, carrying a scroll, not one he wrote. It's sealed with crimson wax and stamped with the mark of Menelaus the king. Hermes breaks it open and reads, "We have received a message. The queen believes it speaks to her." His stomach flips. Wait, what queen? And what message? He didn't send anything to Sparta, did he? You feel it before you see it. The shift in atmosphere. Like thunder cracking far away in a dry sky. The streets are dustier here, colder somehow. You've wandered into Sparta now, where words weigh more than swords, and people don't play around with metaphors. If Athens is a stage and Thebes a nervous temple, Sparta is a fortress where interpretation can get you hurt. Hermes knows this, which is why he's so confused. He's perched on the roof of a Spartan training barracks, chewing nervously on the end of a fig leaf. The crimson-sealed scroll in his hand glows faintly. A message he didn't write, responding to a message he never sent. Or did he? He rummages through his satchel of pranks. There's the goat poem, the riddle about sandals, the half-eaten note about bronze frogs and destiny, but nothing addressed to Sparta. Then, at the very bottom, tucked beneath a squished grape and a cracked turtle-shaped seal. He finds it. Oh no, a message. It reads, "When beauty sails, war follows." He blinks. It's his handwriting. Definitely. But he doesn't remember writing it. That's the thing about being a god of speed. Sometimes you move too fast for your own memory. He must have tossed this one out during his scroll spree, probably aiming for an art gallery or a wine festival. But no, it landed in Sparta. Somehow. And now Queen Helen thinks it's a sign. You hear about it from an old woman whispering in the marketplace as you pass. They say the gods have spoken. Helen's eyes haven't left that scroll in days. You make your way to the palace. Half shadow, half intrigue. At the gates, guards lean on their spears. Nervous? Inside, the tension thickens. Servants whisper behind curtains. Dancers rehearse farewell steps, just in case. In the central hall, Queen Helen stands by a window, scroll in hand, barefoot, still as a statue carved from moonlight. She's not crying. She's thinking. Now, here's your mainstream historical fact of the night. Helen of Sparta later. Helen of Troy wasn't just a pretty face. In some ancient sources, she was revered as a demi-goddess of cunning, beauty, and fate. Some even claimed she had her own temple, complete with rituals and hymns in her honor. She was a symbol of mystery as much as desire. And now, she's holding a vague, ominous message written by a bored god with ink-stained fingers. The words aren't even that specific, but in a court already buzzing with political tension, a phrase like, "When beauty sails, war follows becomes nuclear." Menelaus, her husband, is furious, not at her, at whoever dared to imply something so suggestive. He suspects rival kings, maybe even Athens. He starts calling in envoys, summoning advisors, sharpening metaphorical swords and literal ones. Meanwhile, Helen just keeps rereading the line. It could mean anything or nothing, but it feels personal. And that's what matters. The fringe tidbit for tonight. Some fringe theories claim Helen wanted the war, that she orchestrated her departure from Sparta not as a victim, but as an instigator. A woman bored of being property, tired of being sung about, and ready to flip the board. And here, in this dreamy version of history, you watch that spark ignite. Helen doesn't pack her bags. She just sends for Paris. Yes, that Paris. Trojan prince. Walking poetry. A man with more hair than sense. He arrives within the week, glittering like a misplaced verse. He sees Helen. She sees him. Neither says anything at first. And then she hands him the scroll, no explanation. Just this. Paris reads it. He smiles. "I knew it," he whispers, completely misunderstanding everything. The gods want us together. Helen tilts her head, not correcting him, just watching, because maybe this is the moment, the excuse, the cosmic nudge she's been waiting for. Outside, Hermes clutches his head in both hands. No. That scroll wasn't meant for her. It was a poetic warning about seagulls. You don't know if that's true? He might not either, but it's too late now. Word spreads fast. The queen has received a sign, a divine one, and she's preparing to leave. That's when Menelaus breaks. You hear him shouting from the southern wing of the palace. His voice crashes like thunder against the stone halls. Who sent that message? No one answers. He tears through the corridors, scroll in hand, demanding clarity from priests, cooks, and confused painters. He even interrogates a dog. Eventually, he demands the message be burned. But Helen has already hidden the original. Menelaus's fury simmers into desperation. He writes his own message, sealed in rage-colored wax, and sends it to Olympus, addressed to Hermes. It reads, "If this is your will, say it plainly. If not, undo it." Hermes reads the message in silence. His fingers tighten. His wings flick once, twice, and then he does nothing. Not out of cruelty, out of fear. Because it's no longer about scrolls or mischief or little riddles left under goat statues. This has momentum. Helen is leaving. Paris is sailing. And the world is tilting toward fire. By the time you catch up to the ship, Helen is already aboard, her hair pinned with bronze, her sandals discarded on the dock. Paris stands beside her, proudly misreading the entire situation like a golden retriever trying to interpret Nietzsche. You sit quietly on a crate of olives as the boat creaks away from Sparta toward Troy. No war horns, no dramatic thunderclap, Just the sleepy groan of ropes and the sea's half-hearted applause. Helen says nothing. Paris talks enough for both of them. They'll write songs about this, he tells her, adjusting his cape for the wind that doesn't care. The gods are guiding us. This was meant to happen. Helen finally speaks. Was it? Paris blinks. Wasn't it? She smiles. It's not a warm smile. It's the kind you make when someone's already set fire to the house and you've decided to roast marshmallows. Far above, Hermes watches from a cloud with the dawning realization that he might have just accidentally invented history's most overblown breakup, and he still hasn't told anyone he wrote the message. You float up with him, over wine-dark waves and gulls that scream like exhausted philosophers. Hermes paces the length of his cloud, scrolls spilling from his satchel. He pulls one out at random. It says, "This is not your fault, unless it is." He stares at it, too vague. Even for me, back on Olympus, the gossip storm has begun. Aphrodite is the first to notice. Of course she is. Someone mentions Helen has left Sparta without a declaration, without a blessing, without even a decent farewell feast, and suddenly, Aphrodite is everywhere. She storms into Hermes's cloud space uninvited, trailing roses and wrath. "You started something without me," she demands. Hermes blinks. "Technically, I started something with a napkin and a goat feather." "Oh, please." She snatches the infamous scroll from his hand. When beauty sails, war follows. That's not a warning. That's a romantic prophecy. I didn't mean it romantically. I meant it vaguely. Aphrodite rolls her eyes so hard a mortal somewhere writes poetry about it. She waves the scroll like a flag. "This is mine now. I'm claiming it." "You can't claim a scroll you didn't write." Hermes protests. "You didn't mean to write it either," she snaps back. "So now it's art, and I'm the muse." That's your fringe tidbit for the night. In at least one lost fragment of Hesiod, there's a line suggesting that Aphrodite inspired the voyage that burned the world. Scholars still argue whether this was literal divine meddling or just poetic license meant to impress bored dinner guests. Either way, Hermes realizes he's lost control. Now Aphrodite is involved. And that's like handing a lit candle to a forest fire and telling it to just do vibes. She's already descending toward Troy, whispering ideas into the wind. A contest of love. A war of beauty. Oh yes, this is so much better than that time I cursed a flock of geese. You land in Troy just before Paris and Helen do. The city is grand, yes, but it hums with arrogance, those high walls, those polished gates. You get the sense they think they're untouchable. Spoiler, they're very much not. Paris enters with Helen draped beside him like an answer to a question no one wanted to ask out loud. Trumpets blare. The citizens of Troy cheer. Sort of. It's unclear if they know what's happening or if they've just been trained to celebrate any handsome man who shows up with unexpected royalty. King Priam meets them in the Great Hall. He's old, tired, but too diplomatic to yell, "What is this?" in front of guests. Instead, he simply asks, "And where is Menelaus?" Helen, with exquisite timing, replies, "Looking for a god who doesn't exist." Hermes winces from above. Because here's the problem. Once a story begins spinning, once mortals decide something means something, it's nearly impossible to stop. Even if you're a god, you think about how all of this started. One scroll, one sentence, unnamed, undated, no divine stamp or approved by Olympus watermark. And yet, it's moving ships, it's moving people, it's moving fate. Now, here's your historical anchor. The myth of Helen's departure and the Trojan War was already debated in antiquity. Herodotus argued that Helen never actually reached Troy, that she was hidden in Egypt the whole time, and the war was fought over a ghost image of her. Historians still argue if that was a genuine alternate tradition or just Herodotus stirring the pot for fun. Hermes considers starting a rumor like that, just to soften things. He drafts a new scroll. Helen is elsewhere. You are fighting shadows. Go home. He considers sending it. Really considers. But he doesn't. Because no one's listening anymore. They've already chosen their story. And stories like ships don't turn around easily. You're standing at the edge of a sea cliff now, watching sails disappear into the horizon. Below, waves slap the rocks like impatient drummers. Above, clouds gather like they've been invited to witness a mistake in real time. You're not the only one watching. Hermes is back in Thebes now. Well, above Thebes, hovering uneasily as the city tries to pretend everything is normal. It's not, because word has gotten out. A queen has vanished. A prince has sailed. And the scroll. The scroll is famous now. It's been copied, painted, tattooed. Some guy in Corinth is selling it on tunics. When beauty sails, war follows. You see it scrawled across the side of a temple wall like ancient graffiti. Next to it, a doodle of a goat holding a spear. And now Athens, never one to be left out, decides it needs to react. Dramatically, you arrive in the agora just in time for a spontaneous performance of the scroll cycle. A tragic comedy in 5 acts featuring talking dreams, prophetic turtles, and a chorus of men wearing giant eyeball masks. In the final act, a character called the Winged Whisperer trips over his own sandals and accidentally declares war. The audience gasps, then applauds. Hermes watches from a shadowed column and mutters, "It's not that far from what actually happened." Here's a historical fact for your pillow tonight. Athenian theater wasn't just entertainment, it was civic ritual. Plays were part of festivals honoring Dionysus, and attendance was often mandatory for citizens. They tackled politics, philosophy, and yes, sometimes gossip disguised as mythology. So when Athens hears the same whispers reaching Sparta and Troy, it doesn't respond with silence. It responds with metaphor. The city council convenes a debate to determine what, exactly, the scrolls mean and whether Athens should act. One side argues for preparations. What if this is a divine warning? They ask, "We must ready our fleet." Another side argues for art. If the gods are communicating through verse, they declare, "We must commission more poetry." A third group, mostly older men with long beards and deep sighs, just want a nap? Eventually, they settle on a compromise. Athens will hold a festival of interpretation, 3 days of music, dance, and scroll-themed performance. It will serve as both spiritual inquiry and public distraction. Classic Athens. You walk through the festival that evening, sipping honeyed wine and watching dancers wear scrolls as sashes. Children reenact the arrival of the mysterious messages, complete with tiny wax seals made of cheese. You overhear someone say, "I heard the scrolls are part of a test. The gods are watching to see who interprets best." Another whispers, No, they're tests of character. The messages don't mean anything. It's how you react that matters." And then someone says, "I heard it all started with Hermes." You stop. That whisper spreads, slowly, like smoke curling under a door. First, as rumor, then as certainty. Of course it was Hermes. Someone says, who else would be cryptic on purpose? Back on Olympus, Hermes is watching the flames of drama curl higher. He's not alone. Dionysus appears beside him with a jug of something suspicious and a flower crown made of bread. "I like what you've done here," Dionysus says, gesturing at the chaos. Very interpretive, very post-meaning. "It was an accident." Hermes insists. Dionysus grins. "Aren't all the best things?" Here's a fringe detail. In certain lesser-known myths, Dionysus is said to have once disguised himself as Hermes for an entire month, just to see if anyone would notice. They didn't. This, some say, was the beginning of their odd friendship. Now the two gods float together, watching mortals squabble over poetry and prepare their warships at the same time. Dionysus leans in. "You know what's next, right?" Hermes groans. Olympian fallout. Because while mortals may be confused, the gods are starting to take sides. Aphrodite is fully committed to Troy. Hera, furious that a Spartan queen was lured away, is backing Menelaus. Athena hasn't said anything, but her owl is giving everyone dirty looks. Hermes, hovering awkwardly between all of them, starts drafting a new scroll. This one says, "Take a deep breath, then blame Apollo." He doesn't send it. Yet, instead, he watches as one final thread unravels. A merchant from Troy arrives in Thebes, spreading word of Helen's arrival. He speaks of silk, of banquets, of Paris's smug face. But most of all, he speaks of fate. He says Helen brought a scroll with her, that it guided her there, that the gods are choosing sides. Thebes listens, and for the first time, feels small. Athens listens and begins sharpening both quills and spears. And somewhere in Sparta, Menelaus picks up a sword. Not for show, but for answer. You're sitting in a courtyard now, under a fig tree that's clearly seen too much. Its branches sag with overheard secrets. You're in Olympus, not the mountain, but the idea of Olympus, a place where gods sip ambrosia, argue in slow circles, and accidentally start wars like it's part of their weekend hobby rotation. Right now, the air is thick with tension. Not the thunder and lightning kind, more like a group chat that's about to implode. Hermes walks in holding a scroll and a cup of something that might be wine, might be regret. He's not smiling, not this time. Across from him, Aphrodite lounges like a cat that just broke your vase and wants you to admire the shards. Well, she purrs, "You've certainly got the mortals moving." Hermes doesn't reply. Zeus thunders in next literally. He's dragging a lightning bolt like it's a walking stick, his beard full of storm residue. "I told you all," Zeus begins, voice echoing off imaginary marble. "Stop meddling. Look what happens when you scribble vague nonsense into mortal ears." A pause. Hermes shrugs. "In fairness, no one told me not to write a postcard that might hypothetically launch 1,000 ships. 1,000 ships. Dionysus snorts as he walks in backward. That's oddly specific. Sounds like a branding opportunity. Hera enters last. She's not stomping, but only because she's too dignified for stomping. Her fury has achieved orbit. She left Sparta. Hera hisses. With him. Because of a note. A ridiculous, meaningless note. It wasn't meaningless. Aphrodite snaps. It was beautifully ambiguous. Like love. Or early abstract sculpture. Here's your mainstream mythological fact of the night. The gods absolutely picked sides in the Trojan War. Aphrodite, Ares, and Apollo sided with Troy. Hera, Athena, and Poseidon supported the Greeks. Zeus famously tried to stay neutral, which in Olympus terms means watching from a balcony and judging everyone equally. And it all started here, not with Helen's face, not even with Paris's terrible judgment, but with one line, one scroll. The room boils over. Hermes tries again. "I didn't mean for this to..." "You never mean for anything to happen." Hera cuts in. "That's your whole aesthetic. Wings and whimsy." Dionysus raises a hand. "For the record, I do mean for things to happen, usually drunken things, occasionally goat-related, not helping." Athena mutters from a balcony above, polishing a spear that glows with latent judgment. Zeus slams his lightning bolt into the cloud floor. Enough. This drama must end. But no one hears him. Because at that very moment, Hermes' scrolls begin to reappear. They flutter into the Olympus sky like migrating birds. Hundreds of them. Originals, copies, even ones that were supposedly burned. They're rising from mortal hands. Temples, marketplaces, scroll cases, and dreams. The winds twist them into a cyclone of confusion, each one bearing a different line. When beauty sails, war follows. Do not trust figs in autumn. The eyes are closing. Open your shadow before the storm. Return to sender. The gods stare up. Aphrodite claps slowly. "Well, that's a vibe." Zeus turns to Hermes. "Why are your messages multiplying?" Hermes gulps. "Because mortals started writing their own." And here's your fringe fact flavor tonight. In certain early oral traditions, bards weren't just storytellers. They were believed to receive divine inspiration directly, sometimes literally from dreams, scrolls, dreams, and spontaneous prophecy often blurred together in ancient myth. And now it's happening again. Mortals are dreaming of scrolls. They're waking up with phrases in their heads, writing them down, sharing them, as if they've been chosen, as if the gods are whispering. Only they're not. Not anymore. The gods have lost control of the narrative. Hermes steps back, eyes wide. "They're making me the messenger of fate, which you're not." Athena snaps. "Exactly." Hermes throws up his hands. "I deliver messages. I don't define them." Too late. Mortals have already decided. The great cities are assembling their troops, not because they know what's happening, but because they believe someone else does, and they don't want to be left out. Hera stares out at the rising tide of scrolls. This is what happens when chaos gets branded. Zeus sighs. "We'll have to pick sides." Then, Aphrodite stretches like a cat full of smugness. "Dibs on Troy." Hera narrows her eyes. "Then Sparta gets me." "Wonderful." Dionysus mumbles. "Another war with customized, divine sponsorship." Who's bringing snacks? Here's a detail you can dream on. Scholars still debate whether the judgment of Paris was the true spark of the Trojan War, or just retroactive myth-making to explain something more complex: trade disputes, shifting alliances, honor codes, maybe the scrolls. They were the prequel, the quiet chaos before the storm. You, sitting cross-legged on Olympus's edge, look down at the world. Armies are forming. Ships are carving paths through the sea, and at the center of it all, still clutched in a golden hand, is that first message, unfolded, unchanged, unreadable, yet undeniable. Hermes whispers to no one, "I should have just sent a fruit basket." The ship creaks under your feet now. You're aboard one of the early vessels in a fleet that shouldn't exist yet. A fleet forming not from strategy or diplomacy, but from rumors dressed as prophecies and scrolls mistaken for truth. The men aboard don't know why they're sailing. They just know someone else started it, and that the gods seem to be nodding along. Each warrior wears some token of divine sign on their belt. One carries a coin stamped with Hermes' face. Another has the scroll's phrase tattooed across his arm. When beauty sails, he hasn't decided what to do with the second half. You sit beside the captain, an old Mycenaean with arms like braided tree trunks. He turns to you and grunts. "We used to wait for omens. Now we just follow poems." You nod. It's true, because back in Sparta, Menelaus isn't issuing declarations. He's forwarding messages, literally. He's taken the scroll that started it, all his copy, at least, and sent it to neighboring kings. Enclosed with every dispatch is a single line: "She was stolen." Guided by this, no blame, no negotiation, just one perfect, pointed accusation cloaked in mystery. And guess what? It works. You land next in Pylos, where King Nestor reads the message and immediately summons his scribes. He has it duplicated, gilded, blessed, and read aloud at a public feast. Someone asks what it means. Nestor replies, "It means we have to act." Against whom? A child asks. Nestor just nods toward the sea. Whoever deserves it. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In Homer's Iliad, many of the Greek kings joined the expedition not for Helen but for oaths, alliances, and pride. But here, in this dreamy scroll-spun version, it's all about momentum. Everyone's convinced that someone knows the truth, so they prepare for war rather than be the last to guess it. Back in Ithaca, Odysseus, yes, that Odysseus reads the scroll and squints. He's too clever to fall for riddles, too tired. Honestly, this is a Hermes trick, he mutters, turning the scroll over for secret ink or an elaborate satire. But then a seer shows up, a wandering dream priest who swears the gods showed him a scroll drifting through a burning city. That tips Odysseus over the edge. He packs a bow and a skeptical frown. If they're going to tell stories, he says, "I'd rather write my own ending." Meanwhile, Hermes has stopped flying. He's in a mortal tavern now, disguised as a poet named Lysander, sipping watered wine and listening to his own words being debated in real time. "I heard the message came from Apollo," says one man, slurring slightly, "a warning." No, another replies. "It's Hera's judgment, obviously, punishment for pride." A third, slightly unhinged man leans in and whispers, "The scroll came from the future. I saw it in a dream." Hermes chokes on his wine. This is what you get. He thinks, when meaning becomes a group project, he stumbles outside, scrolls flapping in his satchel like restless birds. The sky is turning purple with pre-battle tension. He sits beneath a laurel tree and begins writing a new note, something to slow things down, something neutral. All stories bend if you stop telling them. He hesitates, then tears it up, because it's too late now. This isn't about stopping, it's about momentum. Here's your fringe-flavored fact for the night. There's a forgotten fragment of lyric poetry attributed to the bard Arion that reads, "First came the line, then came the oar." Some historians think it refers to poetry leading to action. Others think it's a bad metaphor about fish. Scholars still argue. Either way, the scrolls are now oars, guiding ships, stirring seas, tapping out the rhythm of inevitability. You drift next to Delphi, where the oracle receives a visitor, King Agamemnon. He places a scroll on her altar. "Is this real?" he asks. She reads it, frowns. Then, in a voice that's not quite her own, says, "The gods no longer write, they read." Agamemnon nods grimly. Then let them read this, and leaves. You hear a chorus of crows overhead. The message has spread to every city that matters, even those that don't. Scrolls are being carved into shields, whispered into sleep, tossed into fire and remembered anyway. And now, one final thing arrives. A rumor that Paris has another scroll, a second one, supposedly given to him by Aphrodite herself. No one knows what it says. But suddenly, Troy isn't just a city with a guest queen. It's a city with secrets, and secrets are invitations. The wind shifts now saltier, sharper, like it knows something's about to snap. You're standing on the cliffs of Troy, your toes curling over the stone. Behind you, the city glows gold and red under the setting sun. But the horizon is full of sails. At first, they look like clouds, but they're not. They're ships, hundreds of them. You turn, and Paris is pacing in the throne room, scroll in hand, not Hermes' scroll. The second one. The one whispered to be Aphrodite's personal response. The one he tells no one about but rereads a dozen times a day like it's a love letter from destiny. You peek over his shoulder, because you can. The scroll reads, "Beauty owed is beauty defended." That's it. Short, vague, dangerous. He showed it to Helen once. She smiled, but not with her eyes. Paris thinks it's divine permission. Helen knows it's divine provocation. Because here's the thing. Troy didn't take her. She came, but that doesn't matter anymore. The scroll makes it official, reframes the choice as prophecy, and that's how myths get written. Here's your mainstream fact. In many versions of the myth, Helen is passive stolen, seduced, spirited away. But in others, especially fragmentary versions from Cyprus and Egypt, she's a decision maker, a woman who walks into fate like she owns it. This Helen, she brought her own fire. Outside the walls, Troy prepares, not because they understand what's coming, but because of what they think is coming. Scrolls have reached the guards, the markets, the temples. People whisper, war is coming. The gods are choosing sides. Paris has a divine command. The scrolls are multiplying. One merchant claims he saw a statue of Hermes wink. Another says an owl dropped a parchment into her bathwater. A third insists his donkey brayed in hexameter. Historians still argue if these were real signs or just pre-war anxiety seasoned with too much imagination. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Priam is old and silent. He watches Paris polish a spear and wonders not for the first time if poetry should come with a warning label. You're sure about this? He asks. Paris lifts his scroll. I have Aphrodite's blessing. Priam doesn't reply. Because what do you say to a son who believes in metaphor more than memory? You wander through the city as tension builds. Scroll sellers pop up like weeds. New ones appear with lines like, "The queen walks with fire behind her. Only one gate opens inward. What burns once, burns again." Hermes sees these too. He's perched on the temple roof, his wings draped like a cloak, watching mortals quote him without knowing they're quoting themselves. He's not even angry anymore, just exhausted. Dionysus appears beside him, holding a grape and a lyre. You going to stop this? He asks. Hermes shakes his head. They don't need me anymore. They've figured out how to write their own scrolls. Dionysus laughs. Congratulations, you've democratized divine chaos. Is that good? It's entertaining. Here's your fringe-flavored myth slice. In one late Orphic tradition, it's claimed that scrolls appeared in dreams across Anatolia just before the war began cryptic verses about wooden beasts and sleeping cities. The scrolls were burned as heresy, but they reappeared anyway. Dreams can't be censored, neither can rumors. And now, the fleet lands. Spartan and Athenian sails, Mycenaean prows, ships with dragon heads and goat horns, and angry dolphins carved into the bows. The shore groans under the weight of too much purpose. They're not here for Helen. Not really. They're here for meaning. Because some scroll said this matters. Menelaus steps off first, scroll tucked into his breastplate like a grudge. Odysseus follows, eyes scanning the city walls like he's trying to read a sentence no one else sees. You walk among the warriors as they unpack their tents and sharpen their stories. Every man has heard a different version of the prophecy. Every man thinks he's the one fulfilling it. A soldier from Thessaly grips a copper coin and whispers, "The scroll said I'd return a hero." His friend mutters, "Mine said I wouldn't return at all." They both nod solemnly. as if destiny sent them handwritten RSVPs. The next morning, Hermes floats above it all, rubbing his temples. He drafts another scroll, the last one. If you read this, it's already too late. He doesn't send it. He doesn't have to, because the gods aren't writing anymore. They're watching. Athena chooses her side. Poseidon joins. Apollo sharpens his arrows, and somewhere in a field, a horse-shaped shadow begins to take form in a dream. You're standing on the outer wall of Troy now, wind in your hair, salt in the air, and the feeling that everything has paused like the moment before someone blows out a candle, and the flame trembles with indecision. Across the plain, the Greek camp is a swarm of movement, tents going up, armor clinking, soldiers barking orders over fires. There's no trumpet, no thunder from the gods, just the quiet hum of men who've convinced themselves they're following fate. Inside Troy, Paris still clutches the second scroll, now so worn it's become myth in his own hands. He started quoting it to Helen like scripture. Beauty owed is beauty defended, he whispers as he fastens her necklace. Then, what am I to defend? She asks. He doesn't answer, just looks at her like she's already marble. In truth, the city doesn't know what to do with her. She's not a hostage. She's not a guest. She's not exactly a queen, either. She's a symbol now, and symbols are hard to seat at banquets. You follow Helen through the market hooded, silent. She listens to the whispers. She walks like a curse. She's the one from the scroll. She's the beginning. Helen pauses near a fountain. Its water is murky. She stares at her reflection and says, just loud enough for you to hear, I was the middle. The scroll made me the start. Here's your mainstream fact for the night. In later Hellenistic writings, Helen's story became more about perception than reality. Was she stolen? Did she choose? Was it magic? Was it politics? The answer always depended on who was telling the story and what they needed her to mean. You climb higher now, into the Royal Observatory Tower, where Cassandra sits with her head in her hands. Yes, that Cassandra, Apollo's cursed prophetess, the one who sees the truth and is never believed. She's been scribbling scrolls of her own. Most get burned. She doesn't mind anymore. Hermes appears beside her, invisible to all but you and the wind. He reads one of her scrolls. It says, the war will last a decade, but the scrolls will outlive the fire. He winces. Too soon. Cassandra lifts her head. I didn't write that one. Hermes frowns. Then who? A scroll falls from the rafters. A new one. Its seal is odd. Not a god's. Not a mortal's. A kind of hybrid. Cassandra doesn't touch it. She just whispers, they're writing themselves now. Outside, the ships begin to unload. Menelaus disembarks with murder in his teeth. He holds his own scroll like it's the blade of an argument. Odysseus follows behind him, scroll tucked into his tunic, eyes scanning for patterns. He's not here for blood. He's here for answers. Agamemnon arrives last. He doesn't carry a scroll. He carries the weight of all the others, because now everyone believes. Here's your fringe theory tonight. Some scholars suggest that the Iliad wasn't first written to glorify heroes, but to warn future generations about the cost of misunderstanding symbols, that it began as an oral tradition to mock the spiral of vague prophecy into inevitable war. But in this version, that spiral has just reached the gates. Inside Troy, a priest finds an old scroll wedged into a temple crack. It says, the gods no longer argue, the mortals do it for them. He declares it sacred. You sit beside Hermes now, watching the camps below. He's not eating, not joking, just watching. You could stop it. You say, he nods. I know. Why don't you? Because I'm not the one writing anymore. He says, I'm just the excuse. He opens his satchel and empties it. Hundreds of scrolls fall out blank. Copied, reworded, misquoted, over-translated. They scatter in the wind, landing wherever they please. Some reach Troy, some drift into Greek tents. One lands in your hand. It says, no one starts the war. Everyone just forgets how to stop it. The next morning, the first arrow flies. Not because of strategy, because a soldier heard a whisper in his dream and thought it was a command. The sun rises over Troy like it's trying to pretend nothing is wrong. But everything is. You're walking through the city's garden terraces now, where roses bloom nervously and doves avoid eye contact. Below, the plains shimmer with armor Greeks lining up in tidy rows like punctuation marks, waiting for a sentence that hasn't decided how it ends. And you feel it. don't you? That silence just before someone says the wrong thing or pulls the wrong thread. Inside the palace, Priam meets with his war council. The scroll lies open on the table like an extra advisor. No one touches it, but no one looks away either. This is madness, one general says. We're preparing for slaughter over a sentence. It's not the sentence. Priam replies, it's the silence that would follow if we ignored it. Outside, Helen stands on the balcony, her hair braided in solemn patterns. She watches Menelaus among the Greek ranks and wonders if he's still in love with her or just in love with being wronged. She doesn't wave, she doesn't hide, because at this point, she knows her presence is punctuation. She ends sentences now. Below her, the Trojan princes polish shields, whispering prayers not to gods but to phrases. A warrior named Thoas kneels beside his blade and murmurs, "Let the scroll guide my hand." He doesn't even know what the original said, but he believes it spoke. Here's your mainstream historical anchor tonight. The ancient world didn't separate magic and language the way we do. Words were tools, weapons, even containers of power. Curses, oaths, hymns. They did things. Writing something down wasn't just memory, it was ritual. So now scrolls aren't just ink. They're spells. And Hermes, he's back in Thebes. Why? Because Thebes has just announced that they received the original message. A priest claims it arrived in his dream, floating on a river of wine, accompanied by a goat wearing a helmet. Hermes squints. Okay, that one definitely wasn't me. He slides into the temple disguised as a merchant and watches as the priest unfurls a scroll that reads, "The one who listens last, listens loudest." The crowd gasps. People nod like they understand. They don't. Hermes sighs, leaning against a statue of himself. I've created an entire religion by accident. A young woman nearby overhears and says, "Did you say religion? Are you a prophet?" Hermes blinks. No, because you look like a prophet. Do prophets usually carry 3 turtles and a broken lyre? Especially the good ones. She hands him her scroll. Can you interpret this? He looks down. It reads, "Beware the one who writes last." He smiles sadly. That one's real. And then he disappears before she can ask what it means. You reappear with him over the Aegean, where gods are gathering not in Olympus, but in between. That liminal sky space where lightning flickers like gossip and clouds form judgmental chairs. Aphrodite is there, basking. Athena is sharpening logic into steel. Hera floats with arms crossed, the air around her humming like a lawsuit waiting to be filed. They're all watching the war start, and it hasn't even really started. Because so far, it's just been skirmishes, tests, salvos of fear and pride. But soon, the ships will block the sun. The scrolls will be forgotten, but their echo will remain, carried not in ink, but in instinct. That's your fringe tidbit tonight. Some anthropologists argue that early war myths weren't about memory. They were maps, ways to explain why violence kept repeating, why symbols took root, why a single sentence, poorly understood, could kill thousands. You glide with Hermes as he returns to the battlefield. He stands unseen beside a dying soldier, scroll clutched to his chest. The man whispers, "Tell her." I followed the words. Hermes kneels. What words? The soldier points upward. Yours. He dies smiling. And now, the gods begin choosing. Apollo picks Troy, Athena. Seething at the stupidity of it all, sides with the Greeks out of spite. Poseidon joins her because someone insulted his horse shrine last year, and he still hasn't gotten over it. Dionysus. He's handing out fermented scrolls that don't say anything and still cause duels. And Zeus pretends he's neutral, but his thundercloud leans. Hermes watches it all, and for the first time in 1,000 years, he feels tired. He was a messenger, now he's a myth, and the myth has gone viral. You're walking now slowly, carefully, through the narrow passageways of a Greek war camp just before dawn. Everything smells like damp leather, iron, and fear that hasn't quite admitted its fear yet. Men sleep beside scrolls like they're talismans. One mutters in his dream, "The sun bends eastward," and another replies without waking. Then strike west. No one's sure what they mean, but they say it anyway. The scrolls aren't just poetry now, they're strategy. Omen. Excuse. In one tent, Agamemnon sharpens a knife over a fire. He's not looking at the blade. though he's staring at a note that someone slipped under his shield the night before. It says, "Lead, or be the story told after." He doesn't know who wrote it, but he does know what it means. To him, anyway. He folds it 3 times, places it under his armor, and stands across the battlefield. Troy watches. The gates remain closed, but every window in the wall flickers with eyes. Inside the palace, Helen sits by a window, sketching spirals in wax with her thumbnail, the same shape, over and over again. Paris enters behind her and tries to speak, but the scroll is still in his hand, and that says enough. She doesn't turn around. "Do you even remember what you were before the message?" He pauses. "A prince." She finally looks at him. "No, you were just a man." He says nothing, because she's right. And it's happening everywhere. In the Greek camp, a young archer named Korax receives a scroll slipped into his sleeping bag. It reads, "You will not be remembered, but your arrow will." He shows it to no one. But the next morning, when the call to arms comes, he's the first to climb the hill. Here's your mainstream historical touchstone tonight. The idea of being remembered kleos, or glory, was core to Greek heroic culture. Dying was secondary. Being forgotten was the real tragedy. And now, these scrolls, they've become personal myths. Each man believes he's part of a grander sentence. And that's what truly terrifies Hermes. Because myths don't argue back, they just echo. He stands alone now, in the middle of the plain, between 2 armies that haven't quite committed to the blood part yet. He's visible, but no one sees him. He holds up a scroll. It says, "You can still choose silence." But no one's listening anymore. Back in the Greek camp, Odysseus is trying to listen. Really listen. He's reading through every scroll he's collected his own. The ones intercepted, even copies of the so-called original. He pins them to a board like a constellation and searches for patterns. "This isn't prophecy," he mutters. "It's a pattern of persuasion." Diomedes walks in. "What's the difference?" Odysseus looks up. "The first tells you what's coming. The second makes you want it. Here's your fringe twist." In one obscure Athenian play, now mostly lost, Hermes is depicted not as a messenger, but as a playwright, a trickster who creates scripts for mortals to follow, watching from the wings to see how far they'll go before rewriting their lines. Odysseus is the only one left trying to rewrite. He drafts a counter scroll, a simple message. None of this was divine. He nails it to a tree in the center of camp. No one reads it, because by now, the scrolls have become canon, undeniable. Too big to fail, too beautiful to doubt. Menelaus polishes his sword and thinks of Helen, not as a woman, but as a sentence that needs punctuation. And that's the thing about punctuation. It's violent. It ends something. "You're back now at Troy's walls." The first Greek envoys arrive, sashes tied, words rehearsed. They hold out the scroll, the one everyone thinks is the one. They declare, "This was the sign. You ignored it. We are here to finish the sentence." Priam doesn't answer right away. Then he gestures to Helen, still silent, still spiral sketching. She didn't write it. He says, "You did." The envoys leave. The scroll is left behind. And somewhere inside the city, Cassandra writes her own final message. They will fight for a message they cannot read. And when it's over, they will write more. You wake before dawn, surrounded by 1,000 stories waiting to be written in blood. The Greek camp crackles to life, shields lifted, sandals strapped. Words pass like torches, but it's not the commanders calling the shots this morning. It's the scrolls. Each man grips one. Each scroll says something different. Some promise victory, others warn of betrayal. One just says, "Don't trip." The soldier who holds it walks more carefully than anyone else. You drift between tents, hearing men recite their lines like actors in a tragedy no one agreed to direct. Their faces are calm, but their hearts are stormed with sentences. Meanwhile, back in Troy, Helen is done waiting. She puts on her heaviest earrings, the ones shaped like dolphins. Her fingers trail the folds of her robe like they're braille. Then she picks up his scroll. Paris is asleep. She doesn't leave a note. You follow her through the quiet halls, into the temple courtyard. She lights a single oil lamp. She kneels, and she burns it. The scroll, the prophecy, the poetic trap. She watches the ash curl into the night and whispers, "No more words for me." But outside the city, the Greeks have already written new ones. You stand beside Agamemnon now, who's delivering a speech he swears came to him in a dream. He doesn't mention that someone left it on his pillow last night. Sealed in green wax, it read, "Strike first. History only remembers the loudest side." And so he does. The horns blow, the arrows rise, and history forgets how to look away. Here's your mainstream fact. The Trojan War, whether myth or muddled memory, was said to last 10 years, but its origin, its so-called cause, has always remained flexible, retold in fragments, reframed by poets, painters, and power-hungry kings. Some say Helen, some say oaths, but this version, it was the scroll, or at least the idea of one, Hermes, watching from the clouds, has stopped speaking. He floats above the battlefield like a balloon full of regret. He thinks about pulling one last trick, making the scrolls all vanish, unraveling in midair like parchment moths. But would it matter? Not anymore, because now the scrolls are etched in helmets, tattooed on forearms, carved into war banners. Even those who doubt still carry them, just in case. You walk among the chaos, swords clash, voices rise, and through it all, people keep quoting lines they think were meant for them. One soldier dies whispering, "I followed the fire," another screams, "This was promised." No one knows who promised what, but promises are loud when they echo through armor. In the middle of the field, a man picks up a scroll dropped by the fallen. He reads it, "Send this back." He blinks and is immediately trampled by a chariot. Dionysus, reclining in the shade of a broken statue, claps slowly. That one had flair. Here's your fringe myth. Whisper for the night. Some versions say the Trojan horse wasn't just a trick. It was a literal message to the gods, a delivery of finality, a punctuation mark. Historians still argue if that was metaphor, mistranslation, or just someone trying to make sense of senselessness. You return to Helen, who stands now atop the walls. No makeup, no crown, just a woman made of rumors. Beside her, Priam watches the city burn at the edges. "You weren't worth all this," he says softly. She nods. "I know," then adds, "but neither was the scroll, because somewhere along the line, no one cared what it said, only that it existed." You look up. Hermes opens his satchel again. It's empty now. He flips it inside out, just to check. A single scrap flutters out, torn, ink smudged, forgotten. He catches it, reads it, and smiles for the first time in days. It says, "A story is only dangerous if someone believes it." And everyone did. Smoke drapes itself over Troy like a second sky. You're walking through the ruins now, not fire and ash yet, but the kind of ruin that happens in silence, in choices, in meanings that multiply until they collapse under their own weight. Everywhere. People are still carrying scrolls. One boy finds a half-burned one beneath a collapsed archway. He smooths it flat and reads, "All gates are doors, but not all doors open out." He doesn't understand it. He keeps it anyway. You climb the western tower. From there, the horizon looks like it's blinking flickers of torchlight from the Greek camp. Ripples of gold from banners. And ships, so many ships. 1,000. Maybe, all summoned by something no one can define anymore. Helen is already up here, barefoot, eyes dark. They'll write songs, she says. You nod. They won't mention the scroll. You nod again. They'll blame me. And this time, you say, because they can't blame the paper, here's your mainstream wrap-up. Even in the oldest tellings, the Trojan War wasn't about a single event. It was about narrative inflation. Each retelling made it bigger, louder, more divine. A face that launched 1,000 ships. A war blessed by gods. A judgment. A theft. A destiny. But behind all of it, a prank. A sentence. A scroll no one read correctly. In the clouds above, Hermes finally lands. Not floating, just landing. His wings are tattered. His scrolls are gone. His role has changed. He walks into a burned olive grove and sits beside an old tortoise. The tortoise says nothing, but that's kind of the point. I think I ended the world, Hermes mutters. The tortoise blinks. Okay, started to end it, but I didn't mean to. He sighs, and then, with a soft laugh, he pulls out the very first scroll, the original, the one he left in Arcadia, the one no one really read. He unrolls it. It says, "To whom it may confuse. Congratulations, you're in the story now." He holds it up, lets the wind take it. It flutters over the fields of war, the towers of Troy, the broken gates and the broken hearts. It lands at the feet of a scribe hiding in the wreckage, who immediately copies it word for word into a clay tablet. And just like that, the myth restarts. Because that's the thing about scrolls. They don't end stories. They lupa them. They resurrect them. They turn whispers into weapons. You walk down from the tower as dawn breaks, soft and golden and blameless. The city still stands for now. Helen is gone, disguised, escaped, or maybe just rewritten. The Greeks are preparing something, a wooden something, with wheels. But the scrolls, they're already sailing again, across the sea, in the hands of poets, soldiers, lovers, liars. Each scroll says something different. Each scroll says the same thing. You're a part of the story now, and so you are, and now we slow down. The ships drift farther from the shore, the torches dim, the scrolls fall quiet, resting like feathers on the floor of forgotten temples. The gods have stopped shouting. Even Hermes has curled into sleep. Somewhere between a cloud and a sigh, Troy fades into the mist of memory, part ruin, part dream. The scribes will argue over who started it all, over whether there was a message or just a mistake dressed up like one. But you know what it felt like. The wind in your face as the first scroll landed, the echo of footsteps down the marble halls, the weight of a sentence no one asked for, and yet everyone believed. You remember how the story didn't begin with blood. It began with curiosity, with interpretation, with a line that could mean anything, and therefore meant everything. So now, as your body softens and your breath slows, let go of the scrolls, let go of the questions, let the gods sort out the endings, and let the myths recycle themselves without your worry. The sea is calm again. The stars are distant, gentle, unread. You are no longer in the story. You are beneath it, wrapped in olive-scented silence, carried by dreams that don't need meaning to be true. Good night, wanderer. Sleep well.